Police Minister Senzo Mchunu has revealed in Parliament that more than 1,400 rape cases had been thrown out due to insufficient evidence between 2023 and 2024. Though he didn't delve into the reasons, but in most instances, the unavailability of rape kits and the backlog in DNA testing does lead to rape cases being stalled or thrown out. What do we make of these alarming numbers, and what are we, or rather where are we in the fight against GBV and ensuring that women get justice? Let's now discuss this with Wise4Africa Director Brenda Madumise-Pajibo, and joining us via Zoom is founding member of the SA Men's Forum for Gender Activism, Brenda. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today. Sis Brenda, perhaps we'll start with you. These are very alarming numbers, 1,400 in just 12 months. What do you make of them?
Oh, it's not a surprise. And I think if you've been tracking the stats since last year, you will see the numbers have been increasing of reported cases. But that's not a true reflection of the actual violence meted against women in this country. So we use that as a yardstick, but it's not telling the true story. However, when you have a country that has got the kinds of resources that it has, we pride ourselves as a country that embraces technology, that embraces for IR, right? But our responses are very pedestrian in how we investigate, how we monitor, how we even ensure that we get the convictions that we're looking for. So in rape cases, for instance, when you say 1,400 cases have been withdrawn due to, we don't even know, right? But let's be aware that as a country, we had a biggest backlog on DNA testing and rape kits. We had to step up and ensure that the rape kits are found in every police station. And if you recall, the previous minister had given us endless reasons why that was the case. It had to do with procurement and all of that. And those are reasons that were not acceptable at all. You can't tell us that, right? So we had to make sure that the rape kits are available at most of the police stations in the country. And when you're doing that, you're already dealing with a backlog, right? That you have been saying to us, you have been narrowing it and narrowing it. We have not had that since last year, whether we have managed to do away with the backlog and what is the existing current cases that you are dealing with, right? And I think what is a travesty for me as a South African is that all of these things are shrouded in secrecy until activists come out openly to advocate, to protest, to object to somehow how things are done. And I'm asking myself, why does it have to take a lot from South Africans to get things being done when you know your responsibility as the Minister of Police, as you know your responsibility as the Commissioner of Police, as you know your responsibilities as the head of the FCA units, right? As the head of the labs that we have in this country. So I think for me, it's a travesty. And we will continue to have these conversations precisely because there's no commitment to address it. I mean, there's nothing to celebrate or be proud of for a minister to go in front of Parliament to tell us that we've got 1,400 cases withdrawn without even, if you're doing that, come with reasons why that has happened so that we can interrogate you. And hold you accountable.
Of course. And I mean, it's amazing that you say even the number of cases that have been reported has increased, meaning that more and more women are finding faith in going to the police and reporting these cases. And I can imagine then what the impact will be on them. Let's bring in Umbuyisela. I mean, what are then the implications of such a high number of these cases being thrown out, especially on the victims?
Well, the implications, Katleho, is that, I mean, it continues to fester the belief that it's useless to report. By the way, these numbers we're talking about, Katleho, and your viewers, these are reported cases. I mean, what it does, unfortunately, or sadly, is that then you have a sense of despondency that, look, what's the point of going to the police station? What's the point of reporting? Because invariably, nothing will happen. So it I mean, the morale, continues to be down, but also the victims, there's no sense that there is an agency within, I mean, SAPS. And one has got to sympathize when I got with the SAPS in that there has been, I mean, the people on the ground, there has been these austerity measures. I mean, there's been this budget cuts continuously, that even when you have these rape kids, some of them don't know how to use them because there's not been enough or adequate training. So the point I'm making is that what it does, Katleho, is that it continues the despondency and the level that, look, where people will draw, the victims or the survivors would throw their hands in despair and says, there's no point in going to the police station because there are no consequences or nothing will happen.
Mbuyiselo says he sympathizes with SAPS. Do you agree?
No, I don't. I don't sympathize. And I'll tell you why I don't sympathize, right? So it's 30 years of all of this, right? And maybe the sympathy comes from the fact that there's lack of leadership in the police service, right? It's a highly structured system, right? Where you have no accountability whatsoever. So if you complain about a treatment meted against you at a police station, do you know how long it takes you for any action to be taken, right? So I don't sympathize because what I'm looking for is swift, prompt response from police service because they understand the gravity of the situation when anyone walks into the police station to report a crime or a violation against them, right? So that's, for me, it's the level of professionalism that you require from the South African Police Service. That for me to sit here and say I sympathize, I cannot sympathize when you know that once you take an oath to this constitution, and once you decide that you're going to be trained as a police officer in this, you understand the importance placed on you to execute your responsibilities, right? And if there are no resources given to you, surely we need to marshal those resources. If you look at the budget for the South African police service in this country, right, it has been going up. In fact, we're giving more money even to VIP protection, right? Are we giving more money to training many detectives so that they are empowered to investigate cases such as these? I don't think so, right? So why are we not asking the right questions? Let's just ask the questions around how many detectives do we have that are dedicated to sexual offences cases in this country? How many? And when was the last training? And what was that training? What was the nature of the training? So we need to get to those minute details for us to understand the gravity of the situation that we are dealing with.
Mbuyiselo, how does this then reflect just on the broader issues of justice and victim support and just the forensic capabilities that Brenda is making mention of here in addressing sexual violence in South Africa?
Well, it's dismal. And by the way, I agree with Brenda, by the way. I agree. It's not an excuse. The point I'm making is that, I mean, and she's right. The duty bearers, I mean, look, our problem in this country is largely about leadership. It's largely about, and she correctly pointed out, about, is there a will? You know, but the point I'm making, Katleho, is that we also have to go back and say that, I mean, do they have the tools of trade? And for me, there is a resounding no. And the answer is no, they don't have. So coming back to your question, I think that it's important for us again to say that these austerity measures, or where money is allocated, in fact, it may be lack of understanding as to where there is the greatest need. And then surely, and if we have our priorities correct, I mean, you wouldn't, you don't know why would we, put in lots and lots of money into your VIP protection when there is daily, I mean, we're talking about 120 women getting raped in our country every day. And by the way, the emphasis for me is these are reported cases. The point I'm making is that it's important that leadership is called to account, but also, your family violence on the ground, I think more often than not, the tools of trade they don't have. And it's easy to, and sometimes correctly so, to blame them, to lambast them. But one has got to think and seriously about what else do they do when they know that their hands are both figuratively and literally tied behind their backs. they have nowhere to go because, I mean, the response would be that, we don't have enough resources. When we know that our country is in fact, we have enough resources to address this. I mean, Katlego, go to police stations and look at, the so-called private rooms. Go and see their their conditions. I mean, women, in some instances, go in front. I mean, where you'd have, we used to call it, and that would tell you how old I am, you'd call it church office. They would be asked questions that you would ordinarily think that this would invade their privacy. But because the rooms that they are allocated are not, I mean, they are not conducive to ensure that there is no secondary victimization on the survivor or the victim.
Perhaps, Mbisela, I mean, maybe as someone who sat on the Gender Equality Commission, can you talk to us about that role and what was done in addressing some of these issues, especially in ensuring that police are able to, with whatever resources they have, need to do the jobs that they need to do?
Well, in my previous, and by the way, I would not speak for the commission, but I know that, I mean, you have amazing secretariat doing amazing work, and there's, I mean, if you go to, the archives or go to the reports of the commission, you'd find that it has done amazing work. For me, the difficulty and the frustration part is how then these reports gets acted on. It's all very well to do reports that are, damning, but it's to how do we make sure that the Minister of Police or the Minister Social Development Minister on issues such as your shelter movement, how do you make sure that they're held accountable and there's action? It's all very well to produce this report. So for me, has always been my own frustration in the 10 years I've spent at the commission, has always been that we have shied away to make sure that, Minister of Health previously, on forced sterilization. I can give you countless examples where Secretariat, men and women at the commission have done amazing work under difficult or even lack of resources. Because if you look at, of all the chapter 9s, the CGE continues to be the least supported.
Right. Well,
financially,
we continue with our discussion this morning on the 1,400 rape cases that have been thrown out since 2023 until 2024 in the South African Police Ministry. We continue this discussion with Wise4Africa Director Brenda Madumise-Pajibo and the founding member of the South African Men's Forum for Gender Activism, Mbuyiselo. Now, Brenda, maybe let's just come back to some of the points that were raised by Mbuyiselo earlier on. Speaking on commissions that are being set up, the recommendations that are then put out. But really, are we seeing action coming out from, I see you rolling your eyes, and I can imagine that not much is being done with all the other work that is put on the ground, but what is actually needed to be seen in the streets, in our police stations, is not coming through.
Yeah, I think what we need to avoid as a country is trying to play to the gallery and being performative, right? And I think some of this, once we are confronted with a challenge or a problem, we then resort to either a summit or a commission of some sort, right? And that for me has been debilitating in this sense that you have, I don't know how many assurance organization and Chapter 9 institutions that you have that are given the responsibility to look in some of these matters, right? So you've got the Gender Commission that needs to look at gender equality and equity, and it has to conduct its own research and conduct its own investigations. And once an investigation is conducted, there is a report that makes a recommendation. Those recommendations go to different stakeholders, right? Now, who monitors that the stakeholders have done exactly what the recommendations have said, right? That's the first thing, and I'll put it aside. You've got the public protector. I mean, the public protector just issued a report that we're part of on the systemic failures these are administrative failures, right? In the prosecution and conviction in gender-based violence cases, right? Scathing on the state of courts in this country and the conduct of prosecutors, clerks of courts, magistrates, and all of that, right? That was the report was released just before elections, right? It was a hoo-ha. We wrote a month ago to all the affected parties, Justice Ministry, Presidency, Social Development, and we asked the question, please tell us where we are with the implementation of these recommendations. We have not received a response, right? So this is what you deal with in this country, where you can't hide yourself. You can't be an ostrich and put your face in the sand. It's a crisis that you have told us that it's a crisis. It's a pandemic. Surely your response should respond to a pandemic.
True.
Should be quick, should be swift, should be prompt, should be resourced. We have not seen that, right? And we have been singing this song constantly and consistently over the years. And until such time, there is an acknowledgement that these words that we say all the time are not lending, and I'm looking for an appropriate word to use, because when I say performative and playing to the gallery, this is what we have been doing, because after seeing this interview, you're going to say, okay, maybe let's do something. When you have had the opportunity to address all these things holistically, we have given you a roadmap on how to do it. We have said to you, it has to be coordinated approach, multifaceted in its posture and execution. Do that. What's stopping you from doing it? And that's the frustration of many South Africans, that you have the tools before you. What is so difficult in you doing what is expected of you to do, and then getting outraged when a woman is raped, when a woman is killed, and we all get outraged, but we are not focusing on what this administration or any responsible institution that is given constitutional mandate to execute its responsibility is doing.
Right.
So you can have this plethora of reports, right? And if you don't have people who've got a conscience, and conscience to understand that once there's a recommendation, I must act on it. And it's not just at a political level, it's at an administration level, where you have DGs, chief of staffs, chief directors, who must take their jobs seriously and treat every South African with respect and integrity.
Let's bring in Vuyiselo in this part of the conversation. I mean, as someone who's spent 10 years at the Commission, perhaps maybe you can give us some light as to what happens to the recommendations that are made in these reports. What are some of the hindrances? You mentioned earlier on leadership in some instances, but what are the hindrances in those that are sitting in those administrative positions in them not putting forward those recommendations that have been made?
I think it has to do with political will. I mean, when I was there, you like I said earlier, you have some of the brilliant reports. I mean, then the Minister of Health was Dr. Mchunu, and some of us had said, look, I gave you one example on forced sterilization. I mean, a former colleague of mine, Dr. Tlaleng Mufokeng, was leading the charge. I mean, she got extremely frustrated because when we were supposed to make sure that the Minister of Health responds and makes undertaking, I mean, nothing happened. So it's about leadership, but it's also about somehow either fearing the political incumbents that, one has got to act dense. You've got to go around this issue because you don't want to upset the apple cart, So it's about, I mean, how these reports can only be effective if we make sure that, the political head knows that there are consequences. Look, I think more often than not, the reports from the Commission for Gender Equality and other, Brenda spoke about the public protector, a lot of them are not implemented because the political leadership, they know what will happen. Nothing. I mean, there is this cavalier attitude. There's this, because, people know that, who are in power, that look, if you ignore them, they would gather dust there, nothing happens. Tomorrow there's another crisis, we'll respond. I mean, we are a crisis responding country. We're a firefighting country. If you have this report, well and good. So the point I'm making, when Katlego, is that you don't have a political will to hold both at a leadership level at the commission to make sure that we see through. When Secretariat has done amazing work, they give you a report, and you would have to say, like, look, Minister, DG, answer, implement. But they gather dust, and they are used as footnotes, or you can use them for research purposes. As to the survivor or the victim who expects some sort of recourse, nothing happens. The survivor, the victim remains. You'd have the portfolio committee, you'd have all of these, but ultimately, Katlego, nothing happens.
Sure.
And again, as I said, you'd move to another crisis. You'd go, there are women who been raped, they were filming, you go in there, the minister rushes there, then what happens is the evidence has been tampered with, nothing happens. Again, we fold our arms, or we look the other way. We're waiting again for another
report.
Crisis.
Of course. Maybe just in closing, Brenda, I mean, in the absence of a political will, in the absence of administratively things going right, can we turn to civil society organizations and campaigns and initiatives that can educate even from grassroots level that could prevent these rapes from taking place in the first place?
Absolutely. I mean, I think civil society has been in the forefront. I mean, that's what has kept us going for this long. They've been championing some of the changes that you have seen in the country. So that will never go away, right? What is important is for those civil society organizations to be supported. I mean, there are many organizations in the country that are doing this work with meager resources, right? On the ground, talking to communities. But for me, Katlego, is remember, we've got a national strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide in this country.
Right.
It gives you 6 pillars that must work in tandem. You can't have a prevention pillar in isolation of a care and support or even accountability pillar, right? And when you ask today, who is implementing that NSP in its entirety, right? You'll be surprised that even in government, there are government departments at national, at provincial level, at local government, who are not even aware of the National Strategic Plan. But that's their document, right? We're sitting with a situation where when we said that that National Strategic Plan should be popularized, it's been done at a civil society level, because civil society engages daily on this work, right? So it continues to do this work. But it needs a push so that you can have the kind of scale and impact that you are looking for. It can't be civil society alone, right?
Silo,
so
yeah.
Absolutely not. So it requires not just women activists. It does not require just civil society organizations that are working in this field. We need to link GBV in almost everything that we're doing. So when you talk economic policy, when you talk transport policy, when you talk health policy, you need to look at a gendered approach so that you understand what that policy is going to do from a gender perspective. Unless we do that, we continue to look at gender-based violence in isolation and want to respond to it in isolation, when in fact it's part of the microcosm and the ecosystem of what we do daily.
Sure. Clearly our work is cut out for us as South Africans. A lot still needs to be done. But thank you so much for your time and for your insights this morning, both to you and Mbuyiselo. That was Wise4Africa Director Brenda Madumise-Pajibo and founding member of the SA Men's Forum of Gender Activism, Mbuyiselo, who were there speaking to us.